Hey, in this video, we're going to take a look at a budget power station. It's a 600 watt unit from OUPES that competes directly with the likes of Jackery and Rockpals. So is it worth your money? Let's find out. So almost exactly a year ago, I did a review on this Jackery 1000 here that I bought with my own money, and I'll put a link up there if you're interested in checking that out. I've been very happy with the Jackery, but it's kind of probably more than I really actually need. And then so subsequently, I had an opportunity to review this Rockpals 300 unit and found out that it just barely meets my particular needs. And so I thought when the opportunity came up that this OUPES 600, so being a 600 watt unit, falls right in the middle between these two guys, seemed to be an interesting fit. So this might actually be the sweet spot for a lot of people, especially if your use case tends to be similar to mine. So we're going to get into that and kind of talk about what this thing can do and how it stacks up to its sort of Jackery versions and Rockpal versions in that same 500, 600 watt range. So let's check that out. So like most units in its class, it's got a 12 volt port on here that is regulated. That is important because you want the voltage for especially sensitive devices like refrigerators. You want that voltage to be consistent regardless of the discharge level of the battery. So it is on this particular unit. So it's a regulated 12 volt. Down here, it's got a couple of accessory type 12 volt ports that you can use to power other things. Now you do need to buy cables for those to fit those. It doesn't come with those. You do on the USB side, you get two quick charge type B ports. And then you also get a type C port that is a PD 60 watt, which is excellent because this gives you some cool options that I'll describe in a little bit. You get two AC connections here. They're not grounded, there's just a hole. So if you have a 3-prong unit, you have to sort of put one upside down and the other one right side up. And the ground plugs just sort of sit in that hole. And that's kind of similar to all the units that I've seen. They're not really grounded. Now, some of the things I like about this unit right off the bat is it's a nice big display. It's a color display and it doesn't stay on all the time, so it does shut off a lot, which, I'd like it if they maybe even had an LCD with a backlight, but provided this kind of information. And what it will give you is it'll tell you whether or not you've turned the inverter on. So it shows you I've got the AC inverter on, and if I turn the DC side on, those icons show up too. That's just nice to know whether those are activated or not, because you don't want to consume power, especially the AC inverter, if you're not using it, because it will, to power the AC inverter, will continue to kind of trickle draw power from the unit. So you don't want to run that if you're not going to be charging AC devices. The other cool thing is here is it will show you a countdown at the current, whatever the current wattage draw is. It'll show that at the top. Then at the bottom, it'll show you what the approximate runtime is at that wattage draw. So if you're powering things that have a nice consistent wattage draw, you'll be able to tell with actually pretty good precision. And I've checked it out to see that it does give you a valid, usable number. You'll get a nice indicator of what the runtime is. Now, if you're doing something like a refrigerator or an electric blanket, for example, you're not going to get really helpful information out of that because those things kind of oscillate from 0 to 100 and some watts at any given moment, depending on where they are in their run cycle. So that, it's useful at times, not so useful at other times. Now, neither the Jackery or the Rockpals will give you this sort of runtime estimate at all. It's not part of their display. So I do like the fact that that information is available. And that's really it, aside from the charge port on the side. Now, this is up to 100 watts from an AC charge port. Now, it does have that power delivery PD 60 watt port on the front, which is really cool because you can buy something like this, and I'll leave links to these. These are Amazon affiliate links if you're interested. But this is about 25 bucks. I bought this off Amazon. This happens to be a product that gives you an extra 60 watts, so it's got a PD 60 watt port on it. So if you got a Type C cable on both ends, you can plug this in along with the 100 watts from the wall, and you'll get maximum 160 watt input to this thing, and you can really reduce the charge time significantly. Now, you're probably not going to need to do that very often, but in cases where maybe you're just stopping by somewhere temporarily, you want to top this thing off and you're out and about, and you want to do it as quickly as possible, even if you're not charging it all the way up to the top. You just want to get as much power in the limited time that you can. This is one of the ways that you can sort of double charge this through the wall through two different AC outlets, one going into the side through the charge brick, the other one going in through the PD port. And you can get this thing charged from 20% to 100% if you have that much time in just about 3.5, 3.6 hours. The Rockpals also offers PD charging, but it is PD 30 watt, not 60 watt. So this does give you a little bit extra capacity in terms of charging speed, which I find pretty cool. Now let's talk about what else you get in the box here. As I mentioned, you get the charging brick. This is a 100 watt charging brick. You also get a standard 12 volt charge adapter. Now this thing does use sort of a native 8mm barrel connector that is pretty common on most of the Jackeries, except for the higher end ones like the 1500 and the 2000, which uses a slightly thicker barrel, even though it's still an 8mm diameter, I believe. But those use a slightly different barrel. But this is the same connector that is found on pretty much all the Jackeries and available on pretty much all the solar panels you're likely to buy. So solar panels is another topic we're going to get into in a minute. So lastly, in the box for the power station, you get a warranty card. This thing does have a 2-year warranty on it. The guys at OUPES, by the way, you probably heard this pronounced multiple ways, like OUPES, OUPES. The guys at the company told me it's actually pronounced OUPES. They also sent me a solar panel, their 100 watt solar panel with this, because you can get it in a bundle. Now, price is one of the biggest advantages of this unit, and we'll get into the details of that in a few minutes. But the solar panel they sent me is very similar. It's a 4-panel design, so it has Velcro grommets on one end, not all the way across the whole panel. So it's designed to be hung if you don't use the included feet. So this panel, let's go pop a video up here and take a look at setting up the panel, and I'll give you a few comments about the panel itself and its operation. You'll notice that this panel does not have a USB connector module in the back, so it's just got the little 8mm barrel connector that's hardwired into the panel. And also notice that for this last panel right here, to have the standout, you have to zip the bag all the way open because the leg is actually inside. I think it might have been nicer if they had made the bag a little bit smaller, because it doesn't really need to be this big, and then this could be used without having the bag all the way open. So minor issue, but let's see what we got here on the display. So we're getting, hopefully that comes out, we're getting 85 watts. And I do notice that the fan kicks on even though we're outside, and it is literally 30 degrees out here, Fahrenheit. So it's, just below freezing. And we're getting, a real consistent 85, 86 watts. That's not bad for a day like this in the winter. Another common question I get with these power stations is, do they allow pass-through charging? And the answer to that is yes. Now I'll put an asterisk on that for the Rockpals units. The Rockpals units typically only let you charge or power DC devices when you're charging the unit, either through AC or through solar. Doesn't really matter which way you're charging it, but it'll only allow you to power DC devices, not AC devices. That is not the case with the Jackery or the OUPES. You can run AC devices. In fact, I'll put a real quick clip up here of me testing that, so check that out. We're going to check pass-through charging while you're using solar and see if that works. See if the inverter will even power on. Yep, the inverter is on. All right, so that works. So you can see I could power something like a laptop while I'm charging off solar. As in my other videos, I've kind of talked about how when we're car camping, we like to use a electric blanket. It's a Sunbeam. I think it's a full size, and we typically only charge it or use the Sunbeam solar blanket at like level 4 or 5. So I just went ahead and ran a test on level 5 on this. It drains the battery about 6% per hour that you use it at something like a level 5. And for us, a level 5 is all we've ever needed to use it because it's actually too warm. And we only run it for a couple of hours. And something came up in one of my Jackery videos, and I thought I would just go ahead and test it on here, just out of my own curiosities. Can you power a full-size refrigerator? Not a car refrigerator, but let's say you're in an area where you get hurricanes or massive blackouts and things like that, and you want to power a full-size refrigerator. Well, actually, yes, you can with a 600 watt as well as the Jackery 1000. Now, I did a more extensive testing with the 600 watt unit, and I was able to get on a full-size refrigerator, knocked it down about 20% per hour. So I got approximately 5 hours of runtime out of this. Now, this is with my refrigerator not set in eco mode, and also us not trying to keep the refrigerator, out of use and closed so it would maintain its maximum insulation. We were in there rummaging around for dinner in the freezer, opening the refrigerator up repeatedly, because I kind of did this test over dinner. So we weren't particularly conservative in our attempts to try to keep the refrigerators cold for as long as possible. And I still got 5 hours out of that. Now, is that a useful amount of time for a blackout? If probably not. So the good news is, if you want to power a full-size refrigerator, you can do that with these portable power stations, but 600 watts is probably not what you want for that safety solution, for that backup power strategy for that particular use case. Although you can do it, it's just not going to last as long as probably you need it to last. So hopefully that'll help somebody out there, even if it doesn't really pertain to how you normally would use this size of a unit. And by the way, when you're talking about calculating runtime on this, they all pretty much use the same sort of formula. Basically, when you're calculating your device runtime, you want to take the watt hours of the unit and you want to multiply them by 0.85. Now, that's so 85% of the available watt hour capacity if you're powering something via the AC ports on the unit. If you're powering through the DC ports, you don't have to then power the AC inverter, and so your efficiencies will be more like 95 or 96. So you'd multiply the watt hours by like 0.95 or 96. And then you divide that by the watt draw of the device you're going to be powering. So in my case, let's say I wanted to power a bunch of grow lights here, and they draw 477 watts. This particular unit is a 595 watt hour device capacity. So I'm going to multiply that by 0.085, so 85% of 595, and then divide that by 477 watts, which is what my grow lights take, and that'll give me a runtime of about 1.06 hours. And I did a quick test on that because when I did the test, the little display at the bottom did tell me I had approximately 1 hour of runtime. And the actual runtime I got out of it with that light set at that wattage draw was right in line with that. I got almost exactly 1 hour of power for that. So I think the gauges on here are fairly accurate from what I can tell. All right, so let's talk about similarities and differences between some of its competitors in the space, like particularly the Jackery 500 and the Rockpals 500. So obviously this has a higher capacity at 595 watt hours than the other ones. The Jackery is 518 watt hours and the Rockpals is 505 watt hour capacity. Now, the other big differentiator here, other than price, which I'll get into in a minute, is chemistry. This uses lithium iron phosphate. So LiFePO4 is the chemistry of this versus lithium ion for the Rockpals. And I think the Jackery uses lithium ion NMC, which is, I think, nickel, metal, cobalt, or something like that. And there are slight differences between that and just a straight lithium ion, but they're not significantly different. You do have to be very careful how you dispose of any battery, but particularly just straight lithium ion. The LiFePOs are considered much more environmentally friendly in that regard, but some other differences of LiFePO4, they're not quite as energy dense as straight lithium ion. So for the same capacity, they tend to be a little bit heavier. So for example, this 600 watt unit comes in at 15 pounds, and the Jackery comes in at 13 pounds, and then the Rockpals variant comes in at just a little over 12 pounds. But then there's also some capacity differences there that you have to take into account. So this is only slightly heavier and really not a big deal because honestly, nobody's backpacking with this. You're carrying this in your car and going tent camping with your car, but you're not dragging this out into the wilderness on a backpack. LiFePO batteries typically have a little bit longer shelf life at retaining charge. It's not significantly different, about 15% longer than standard lithium ion. They're considered far more stable and less likely to have thermal runaway problems like lithium ion can if you puncture it, for example, and you can get those fires like you may have seen in some of those cell phone videos where a cell phone gets punctured or overheated and they can actually burst into flames. That is not going to happen with a LiFePO battery, so they're a little bit safer in that regard. Now, from a a charge-discharge standpoint, the Jackeries, for example, being the lithium-ion NMC technology or chemistry, I think they're rated for either 500 or 600 charge-discharge cycles, and up to that point, they will maintain at least 80% of their original capacity. And I thought that was pretty decent, but a lot of times you'll see bigger numbers on other devices, especially ones using LifePo chemistry, because those are anywhere from 5 to 10 times longer charge-discharge cycles and still retaining at least 80% or more of their battery capacity. So those are some advantages of the LifePo chemistry. Let's get in and talk about price. Now, the Jackeries are always tending to be the sort of premium priced option, and that's no exception here. Their 500 watt unit is typically $500. The Rockpals unit is typically $486, and this OUPES 600 is typically $495. Now, all of these come with coupon deals that you can get on a regular basis. And again, no exception here. The coupon deals, however, on the OUPES are much better than they are on the Jackery. So you can get this thing for $350 with a coupon on Amazon. And that's competitive with the Rockpals, actually. But you do get better capacity. You get a bunch of other advantages that I talked about earlier. And so they're about the same price as the Rockpals with the coupon applied. But like I said, there are a variety of advantages to this over the Rockpals. And then if you happen to get it with the solar panel bundle, right? They sell this on both Amazon and on the website. And if you get it from Amazon, you can get this with their coupon. They have a $150 coupon that brings the price down to $550. Now, I did put a coupon code in the description below if you want to check it out. Because if you go to OUPES.com, their website, you can buy the solar generator bundle, which is this, and the 100-watt panel, and apply that OUP20 coupon code to get an additional 20% off their bundle price, and you can get it from there direct for only $472. That's actually a fantastic deal. And that's a pretty compelling sell, because I really feel like from a build quality standpoint, this is very similar to the Jackery. Similar enough that the differences aren't, I don't think, even worth mentioning. Like, I'd be hard pressed to come up with any, to be honest. But it really does feel well built. It has a 2-year warranty, just like the Jackery. So I feel like it's a viable competitor, something like the Jackery, but at a significantly reduced cost, in addition to some of the other advantages that I mentioned. So anyway, hopefully you found the information here useful. If you did, please consider giving us a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. And consider subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. So that's all I got for you on this video. I do hope to see you in the next one. Until then, have fun out there. Now, recharge times. Now, they're like I said, they're fairly similar. Now,